I want to ask you about C0. Your company is sitting at the intersection of things that are fascinating to my reporters: the promise of hydrogen-based technologies, the difficulty in dealing with methane. So, if I understand it correctly, C0 allows natural gas to be used without producing carbon emissions. Can you give people a brief explanation for how exactly you guys pull that off?
Yeah, absolutely. So natural gas is a hydrocarbon. It's composed of hydrogen and carbon. And what our technology does is remove the carbon from the hydrocarbon, which leaves just hydrogen behind. So we effectively allow natural gas to continue to be used without making any CO2.
And then the hydrogen burns clean without any emissions that we associate with natural gas or oil or coal. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, the only byproduct is water.
And one question that comes up is where the carbon goes. So you are producing carbon, but it's not being released in the air. Where does the carbon go in your model?
Yeah, so it's actually, we remove the carbon as a solid. So we really kind of think of our technology as pre-combustion carbon capture rather than producing CO2 that you've got to compress, transport in a pipeline, inject into the ground, and then worry about whether it's going to leak for the next millennia or so. We've got a solid carbon that's much denser that you can really sequester just about anywhere. So we kind of think of it as pre-combustion carbon capture.
That's fascinating. I want to get back to the end result, but first I want to ask you, your company connects to all of the buzz that people hear about the potential of the hydrogen economy. There's as much promise as there is, I would say, skepticism around the potential for hydrogen. What do you think that skeptics get wrong about hydrogen?
I think that there's a lot of different applications that hydrogen can be used to decarbonize. And I think that thinking about it as a Swiss Army knife that can just kind of do everything is probably an oversimplification. But I do think there will be some applications where hydrogen really has a strong value proposition. I think one of those is making dispatchable zero-emission electricity to complement intermittent production from renewables like wind and solar. And what we allow is basically the connection between natural gas molecules in the ground today and a decarbonized, electrified future of everything, with part of those electrons coming from wind and solar and part of those coming from hydrogen. So I think that'll be a great application that's probably here to stay.
So if natural gas plants are today kind of handling that intermittency role when the sun isn't shining or when the wind isn't blowing, in the future, hydrogen made from C0 could be replacing it. One question I have about this process, does it take an abundance of cheap natural gas for your system to work? Many people are trying to push against the continuation of natural gas because of the impact that it has on emissions and leaked methane. Do we sort of need to have a lot of natural gas in our energy system in order for the C0 method to work?
We think of ourselves as really the bridge between the existing natural gas infrastructure and a decarbonized future. And one thing that I think gets overlooked is that there's kind of a view where, oh, we're just going to stop doing everything we're doing today and completely start over again. And that's not really the way that energy systems or any systems evolve. I think it's going to be a gradual transition. And that's what's so great about our technology, is that we fit into the existing infrastructure rather than have to start from scratch, which is important for both cost and also time, too. I mean, climate change is really urgent. We need to reduce CO2 emissions as soon as we can. And so being able to utilize the trillions of dollars of infrastructure globally that are in place today is critical for both the cost and time components.
So on the time component right now, where is C0 in terms of its trajectory towards a commercial scale plant? Are you right now in the pilot stage, and how much hydrogen can you make today?
Yeah, so today we're kind of doing this at the lab stage. We're going to have our pilot online at the end of next year, and we'll be producing at commercial quantities at the end of 2024. But we've got some great investors and partners like Breakthrough Energy Ventures, ENI, and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries that we're really hoping will be able to accelerate the commercialization.
So since you brought up Breakthrough Ventures, I wanted to know if you could tell us what it was like going through the process of partnering with them and having them become an investor. They're one of the most interesting venture funds that we follow what they do. What was it like kind of welcoming them into your process?
Yeah, Breakthrough Energy Ventures team has been fantastic to work with. They're probably have done the deepest technical dive of any investor that we've ever talked to. They've got experts from a number of fields, including our specific technology as well. And so it was fascinating and great to work with an investor that saw the big picture vision and could really talk with us on super technical terms. I mean, Breakthrough was involved when it was just our CTO and I sitting around a conference room at UC Santa Barbara. So they've been a great partner from the very beginning and continue to be.
And once you're up at commercial scale after the pilot launch at the end of this year, who do you see as the customers for the hydrogen that would be coming out of your process?
Yeah, great question. Really, we think of the potential customers for this as any customer who's currently using natural gas today for energy. So that could be a combined cycle power plant that's making electricity from natural gas. They can use hydrogen. That could be a refinery. Hydrogen is a big input into refining of gasoline and diesel fuels. So they could use our hydrogen in place of the very CO2 intensive hydrogen they're currently using today to help decarbonize those fuels without having to change over the infrastructure and the fleet associated with them. We've had a partnership with some utilities that want to go use our technology to decarbonize natural gas infrastructure, like pipelines, and deliver actual BTU content to customers downstream from hydrogen. So there's really no shortage of potential customers, and figuring out what market we want to start with is something that we'll be doing in parallel along with the technical development and launch of our pilot.
So if natural gas was a bridge to renewable energy, it sounds like the hydrogen made by C0 is a bridge away from that bridge, like a further bridge. One thing I want to talk about is, since your process is able to eliminate the carbon emissions associated with natural gas, the carbon, you said, in the end ends up in a landfill. Is that just like any other garbage going into a landfill? Is it safer? Is it something that we need to worry about leaking? Is there an environmental impact to the carbon byproduct of C0?
Yeah, well, we actually think about it being sequestered rather than landfilled. And while we don't ascribe any value to the carbon, there are some applications that we're looking at that could be interesting, either through naturally oxidative processes or through some kind of biological process. So it should be totally benign, if not a slight benefit in terms of its ability to absorb other sort of harmful things that might be leaching out of a sequestration site.
That's so interesting. Right now, when you look at the landscape of other companies in your space or other people trying to move into the hydrogen technologies, is there something that you see is very promising right now that's on the horizon?
I think one of the things that's really exciting about hydrogen is that it works very well with nuclear energy. And so if you're developing hydrogen infrastructure today, if some of the fusion companies are successful or some of the small modular nuclear reactor companies are successful, you can use those technologies to generate hydrogen and keep using all the hydrogen infrastructure that's been developed in place. So I think some of those technologies are really exciting and interesting, potential hydrogen production pathways.
One last question I wanted to ask you. I know all the different hydrogen derived from different sources get different colors. What's the color associated with your hydrogen?
So we think of our hydrogen as being turquoise in that it's a combination of green hydrogen made from renewable electricity and blue hydrogen where CO2 is sequestered. We really think it's the best of both worlds. It's no CO2 is produced, and it's also low cost.